Hello, everyone. My name is Mark from the Misplay Podcast, and you're listening to Eternal Journey, everyone's favorite Eternal podcast.
Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
Greetings, Knights and Puntawans. You are listening to Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, and you are tuning in to episode 127 of the podcast, where we are going to be doing an archetype breakdown for the Unleashed set. But first, I want to welcome my good friends on the show. First off, we have John Holio.
Hello.
And we have Draft Limited Eternal World Champion Gunner. What's up, buddy?
I'm not sure how long I can say that for, but yeah, let's keep it on. How's it going,
I think I saw a rank 1 next to your name right now, so.
Well, I guess.
And you're permanent world champion.
Yeah, I mean, until they crown a new world champion, you're the world champion. That's how kind of
That's
works.
That's true. Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That's literally the way it goes. So until they manage to figure out how someone can dethrone you, yep, you're pretty much the eternal world champion eternally.
I'll take it.
Exactly. You can take that to your grave, add it to your resumes, it works out. I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but you're hiring an eternal draft world champion. It's pretty impressive to have on the resume. You know what I mean? There could be only one, and you're the one. So
it's the Highlander. Yeah, that's true.
And we've got him on our show.
No, instant credibility. That's it. Clickbait title. We have the only first and last Eternal Draft World Champion on the show. Fair enough. So, before we jump into our archetypes, let's go ahead and break down AR Pack 1 Pick 1, courtesy of the John Holio. So, we will allow our guest to go first because, Draft World Champion. So, first off, we have Dune Wave. This is a fastball for 3 time, Unleashed, which is, of course, anytime you play it, you make a copy of it in your hand that you can play until the end of turn, and then you discard it. And the spell, put a unit with flying on the bottom of its owner's deck. Next up is Jotun Warrior. This is a 3/5 Jotun Warrior for 5 blue. Maniacal Reveler is a 1/1 mage for 3 time. When another unit goes to your void, Maniacal Reveler gets a +1/+1 permanently. Concealed Derringer is a +3/+0 weapon for 2 red. Frenzy, the wielder gets quick draw this turn. Frenzy is anytime the opponent's face takes non-combat damage, i.e. a weapon, spell damage, and I think that's it, right? Am I missing another way to... It's just weapon damage, spell damage.
You're close. I mean, it's the description's not exactly accurate because it's like when you deal the damage or I think any unit hits them, whether it's theirs or yours, and as long as it's not in combat, but if they play
if you ping them,
damages themselves, that doesn't count, for example.
Got you. Yeah. Correct. Thanks for the clarification, John. Appreciate that. Next up, Sleight of Hand is a fastball for 3 blue. Draw 2 cards. Transform each power card drawn this way into a snowball. An old fan favorite, Consuming Greed, is next. This is a 2/1 Nightmare for 4 shadow, flying, and then summon. You may sacrifice a relic to play a 6/4 Rust Fiend. Cabal Associate is a 1/2 Rogue for 1 shadow, Frenzy, +1 strength permanently. And the final common is Bren's Insight. This is a spell for 2 time. Draw a relic or unit from the top 4 cards of your deck. Discard the rest. A work, what was it? Calibrate? Wackalate? Yeah. Wackabrate. And then at the uncommons, we're going to have a Forensic Analyst, which is a 1/4 Valkyrie for 3 Justice. Flying. Ultimate, when an attachment goes to your void, transform Forensic Analyst into Chief Investigator West, which is just a bomb card. I can't see the flip side of it right now because this is a screenshot, so we'll just have to take my word for it. It's a pretty good card. I've seen John wreck a couple of people with it. And then Breath of Miviox, which is a spell for 6 double shadow. Steal, ready, and give an enemy unit taunt this turn. All right, Gunnar, before we go into the rare stuff, talk to me, man. What are you looking at this pack and why?
So as you were going through the commons there, I kind of got, I'm not going to say a warm, fuzzy feeling, but I was like, this is an Unleashed pack because the commons are just so bad, basically. Like the best one is probably June Wave, which is good. Now that it's been changed and reworked, it's actually very playable, and I like to have at least one copy. Probably play 2 max if I'm lacking interaction in time deck, but yeah, there's quite a lot of flyers running around, and being able to answer them, and sometimes in the late game you can just take out completely the opponent's air force, which is very nice. So yeah, apart from that, Derringer is okay. Again, it got reworked as well. Quite nice in aggressive decks, and then it falls off quite rapidly, probably to Jotun Warrior, and then the rest are kind of cards that unless I'm looking at a specific deck, not really ones I want to play too much. The uncommons, Forensic Analyst is very good. Like you say, the flip side is a 4/4 hero that when it attacks, you get to play a 1/1 Valkyrie on your side and then gain an armor, which is very strong, can just take over the game if your opponent can't deal with it. Breath of Miviox is very expensive, and the effect I haven't found to be too great, because by the time you can cast it, usually your opponent will be able to either like chump block the unit, or I mean, it's fine as like a pseudo, remove a blocker, have an attacker, but at 6 it's very expensive.
So question,
yeah,
with the power level of Analyst, do you just take it and put it in any deck, or do you think it has somewhat of a build around requirement?
I think the flat rate of a 3 for a 1/4 is 3/4, flying as well. In this set, when you've got Griffin at common, the 2-drop, the 3-drop primal flyer with Unleash. You've got the Shadow Bat for 2 cost. That's a 2/1. You've got quite a lot of flyers, and this blocks them all quite nicely. So if I'm pack oneing it, I'm kind of keeping an eye out for the relics that go to the void, or the attachments, desertion hours, stuff like that. But if I had no ways to turn this on by the end of the draft, and I was in Justice, I probably would still play it, unless I'm like got plenty of other stuff to go in instead of it. So yeah.
Got you. John, anything else to add as far as the commons and uncommons go?
Not really. I do just want to mention, like, Analyst, when the format started, I think I was kind of like in my mind looking more for like hours and things like that, but they're just a little slower than you'd want. I think, like, it turns out the best enabler is like basically what's man, I just drew a blank on the name, but it's like the fire one drop relic weapon.
Loot string bow, yeah.
Oh, the one that pings as well.
Because like you'd already like bow has already been overperforming, so you don't mind having like 2 or even 3, and that thing like it does it for 1, right? Maybe you can like take out 2 units while triggering this attachment thing, and then the other card that I think goes great with it is Rivet's Wrench. All the other kind of relics are a little slow, or maybe not as reliable for triggering it like on curve, but like Gunnar said, you still just play this. I think in any deck playing Justice, stats are fine.
Sweet. All right, so we actually get a twofer here. We actually have double rare in this pack, thanks to reprints kind of taking up an extra slot. So first off, we have Siphon Vitality, which is a fast spell for 6 Xenon. Enemy units get -1/-1 permanently, and your units get +1/+1 permanently. So a very powerful kind of 2 point or 4 stat swing. at fast speed, which is pretty powerful on the right board state, albeit expensive. Then we have Rockfort, which is a relic for 3 Praxis. At the start of your turn, play an Etched Totemite, which is a 0/1 unit that at the beginning of your next turn, it sacrifices itself and gives you a power. Pay 5 to give a unit +1 strength, charge, and taunt this turn. Presumably your Totemite. So yeah, sending it back over to Gunner. Do either of these pull you off of any of our uncommons or uncommons?
They do, yeah. Yeah, I think I take both of these over the analyst. I think Rockfort was probably pretty close, but to the analyst, depending on how you want to go. But I've been quite impressed with it. It's done quite a lot of work for me.
That's good to know, because I thought the card was going to be extremely clunky, but I obviously have not been able to see it in practical application yet. So you're kind of happy with it?
Yeah, I am, because it gives you, so the time you play it, it doesn't affect the board, which is a little bit rough. But even if it's just giving you a chump block every turn, while you kind of in time and fire, you can, in practice, you can kind of build up to some larger units and stuff like that, 5-6 drops, and then you can also start giving stuff charge and taunt, which is this is a very powerful effect, even though it costs 5. Having something to do with your mana, to your power, sorry, in the late game is very nice, and it's quite a potent effect as well. Can just kind of lock your opponent out of the game if you've got a big unit that they basically have to just use to block every. You can give taunt to, and so they're kind of constantly on the back foot, and you can pressure them, as well as, like you say, giving the Totemite charge and taunt, so they kind of have to block that, which means something else, presumably larger, gets through each turn, while they just have to try and keep up with what you're doing. But yeah, Siphon Vitality is just extremely strong card in general, very powerful effect, and usually when you cast it, if there's any kind of board stall or combat, you just kind of win on the spot, really. And it's very splashable as well. So yeah.
So is that the one you're windmill slamming here?
That would be, yeah, for me.
I mean, it's got to definitely say something about the power level of the card, considering it's 2 colors and a 6-drop, and you're taking a pack one, pick one.
Yeah.
Are they colors you like to be in this format? Does that help or not really?
I'd like time quite a bit, because it's usually this format, even though there's some removal at common that's kind of catches all, like Towering Terrazon is kind of the king at common for unit size and stuff like that. So trying to answer those is quite rough usually for your opponent. So yeah, Shadow has not been too great for me, unfortunately, because kind of the commons are not particularly good. Or I found them not to be great for Shadow. But there's definitely some powerful stuff you can do. But yeah, it's just the overall power of the card is overcomes any kind of color bias that I have.
Fair enough. John, I know it's very tough to follow Gunner. He's very thorough in his explanations, which we appreciate. But anything to add?
Not really. Like, I agree with him on basically all points.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah.
So pack one, pick one. Siphon Vitality is going to be the windmill slam here. Fair enough. All right. So we got quite a few archetypes to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive on in. And John, I guess I'll let you take point on this one, just to give you a little bit of reprieve before Gunner explains every other nuance to it. First off is going to be Frenzy. It's one of the main mechanics that we definitely saw. I think it was the one we kind of undervalued until we saw the practical application of it in practice, and then realized that it very much is a thing that is happening. So, yeah, John, talk to us a little bit about the Frenzy deck.
Sure. So I think Frenzy essentially is, Fire, Primal Shadow, like that wedge of colors. So you can be kind of any combination of those, like two of the factions together, or all 3 even. When you're in a Frenzy deck, typically you want your curve to be a little lower, because one of the better cards for a deck like that at common is like sleight of hand, which messes up getting to like higher power. Right, like it replaces your power draws with snowballs, keeps your gas going, and kind of gives you free ways essentially to trigger frenzy, while getting rid of those, otherwise kind of dead power cards in your hand. Right, you're not going to want to play too much Unleash alongside Frenzy unless they're just super powerful cards like Carnivorous Terror, for example. Like I think you still just play a card like that regardless. But like those Griffins in Primal for 3 and then 6 to Unleash, like those don't go great in a Frenzy deck, but you still might play them because you might be playing cards like Windscreamer is a great payoff, for example, or like Darkheart Acolyte. Like a lot of the best payoffs are uncommons, but I mean, a frenzy deck is just it's kind of like a tempo-y deck, right? Aggressive slash tempo, typically, with a little tricky stuff going on. A lot of your cards are kind of dual purpose, like potentially frenzy enablers, as well as like potentially just removal spells. So you got to like kind of prioritize when to point your spells at their face versus units on the board, and that's just completely like game and board state dependent. But you kind of want to max out the number of potential frenzy triggers that also have other uses, right? You don't want to just have cards in there solely to trigger frenzy because your payoffs aren't always going to show up in the games, right? So you want, the best frenzy decks will be able to apply pressure regardless of the synergy. But when you do get those synergies in games, they really shine. Like they let you do kind of busted stuff, like get 5/5 flyers for free, or like make your whole board fly with stat buffs, or you know turn out 6/6s like at fast speed and things like that. Like it's like a deck that I really enjoy playing because it's like it's on that tricky side, which I just enjoy that kind of archetype typically. Um, but yeah, like sometimes the packs don't deliver the cards that you need to make the deck great. So like I said, you want to kind of have a backup plan in mind while you're drafting Frenzy.
Do you think this deck has the potential of suffering from drawing your cards out of order?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
If you draft a deck that is just too much synergy, that can happen and you just lose. Definitely.
Okay.
So I mean, a lot of my best Frenzy decks aren't even just all Frenzy cards. It's some of maybe half the deck is just good stuff, and then hopefully most of my Frenzy cards are good on their own with upsides.
Gunnar, what's your take on the Frenzy deck?
Yeah, so I've tried to when the format shifted, the changes came in and stuff. I tried quite a few times, and yeah, I think I suffered quite a bit from having too much of one part of the deck and not enough of the other. So either, although, well, yeah, maybe that's not quite right because you can't really have too many payoffs to be fair, because most of these are uncommon, like or rare, the good ones. But the balance wasn't quite right. In it felt like it when I was running through the decks and they weren't performing great. So I would draw, yeah, like either all my enablers, most of my enablers, and one payoff, or the payoff would get killed. The opponent wouldn't interact, and then kind of just sitting there with a lot of inefficient stuff in your hand that you can't really leverage once your main payoff is off the board. So if you can get the signpost uncommons, like the Darkheart Acolyte that John mentioned, the Windscreamer, the Bully, which makes the 6/6s, stuff like that. If you can get those, the Found Adepts is a very nice one as well, which is kind of good on its own anyway, just as a 2-drop for Primal and Shadow 04, the flying. Even if you can't trigger that with a sort of frenzy each turn, if you can just pump it so that it's got a power, or put a weapon on it or something like that, it can just bury your opponent in card advantage after just a few turns. I always feel whenever someone plays that on turn 2 against me, it's just like the groan test it's like, oh man, like I'm just looking at my hand, like how do I deal with that? Because I just really don't want them to start having that kind of card draw and card selection for free. So yeah, if you can get those payoffs relatively early, you can start kind of building in that direction. But even then, I find myself, it doesn't come together all that often for me. So yeah, I've really I've enjoyed trying to make it work, but I just wish I was better at it.
So John, sending it back over to you on that note, like when do you feel comfortable feeling like you can kind of go into frenzy? Like is it somewhere in like pack or pick 3 or 4, or are you looking for specific cards?
I mean, sometimes I kind of lean that way if I open one of those kind of busted cards, um, like pack one, pick one, even, and then I hope I don't train wreck my draft, right? Like the way the format shakes out, it seems like the signals matter most in packs 2 and 3. And like sometimes you just gotta kind of ditch what you were doing and maybe only keep a couple cards from your pack one when you're switching gears. And I mean, sometimes that happens sometimes, but um, like Gunnar mentioned, Felon Adept, and that's like that's like one of the better ones, both with payoff and synergy, because at the end of the day, you don't even need Frenzy to make that one a great card. Like the 0/4, just it's like the 1/4, it kind of blocks most things in the air regardless. And then you can literally just like buff it in some way or put a weapon on it. You don't even have to trigger Frenzy. It definitely gets better with Frenzy in the deck, but that's just going to be a good card if you're playing those colors, kind of no matter what. Like at that point, I might just play like a Ritual Dagger, to go along with it, or just some of those Derringers, right? Like just any kind of buff on that makes it good. So like um, as I'm going through pack one, if I do kind of 3 or 4 picks in, get past something like or a windscreen or something, that's a bit of a sign, I think. And I'll maybe go a little harder into that archetype, but you still might just get completely messed up when you get into packs 2 and 3. You just have to like kind of be uh, mindful of that and be willing to switch gears if you don't want to train wreck your draft. I know Alex, who couldn't make it today, unfortunately, is like playing a lot of that frenzy wedge, and I think
Mm-hmm.
having a lot of success with it. I'm like somewhere in between where like I just enjoy it so much. Like I'm really down to play it whenever it seems to be coming, but I've definitely had some decks turn out that just didn't quite work out. Like one where there's just like missing one little piece. It felt like, and you just kind of get not run over, but it just felt like you didn't have a chance in some of those games. So yeah, it's during the open, for example, I may not get to play a frenzy deck. It's just like especially like late in pack one and then going into packs 2 and 3. If those cards are flowing, like I'd be happy to get in there, but I'm not gonna, in a competitive tournament like that, I'm not gonna be trying to force it just for fun.
Gotcha. Anything to add to that, Gunnar, before we move on to the next one?
No, that's a very nice summary. Very nice summary. Yeah.
Good job, John. Way to turn the tables, man. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and hit the other mechanic that definitely was something that people were looking at ended up being a little too much, and then they decided to nerf it after the changes that we had discussed in the previous call, and that's Unleashed, which are obviously the creatures that you can essentially just keep making more of, or spells or anything. Actually, they have Unleashed on everything. It's already something that we ID'd as something being very powerful because you're essentially getting free cards with not much work other than just having the power to do it. So sending it over to you, Gunnar. There are 2 variants on the Unleashed deck. There's the Recursion and the Bounce. So you can either talk about both or one, and we'll let John take the other. Up to you, my friend, since, we bow down in the Eternal Draft World Champion.
Sure. Yeah, I'll tackle the bounce because that's kind of the one I've played the most with. I would say. So, as you said, unleash is a powerful keyword because just gaining free cards even if you don't play them, even like you say, you can make it makes it because it makes that extra copy in your hand. You can discard it. You can transform it into a snowball with something like trick throw, and then if you don't have enough power to play the unit or spell that you've made, you can ping Trigger Frenzy, or ping off a unit, something like that, finish off a blocker. So yeah, it's very flexible, very powerful ability. So having this kind of inbuilt power level in the cards mean that something like Grumbo's Platoon, which is just like a 2/1 for time 2, and with a leash, which kind of looks a bit unassuming when you first see it, and then you actually play with it and you realize, okay, you can do some stuff, because as soon as you start bouncing this with something like the tenured Graviturgist and giving it +1/+1, putting a copy back into your hand, and then suddenly you've got another 3, maybe 4 3/2s on your side, and your opponent is just completely buried, unless you're in immediate kind of danger of dying to flyers or what have you. You're going to be in pretty good shape for that game. So Graviturgist is the main one, but there's also things like Lost in Thought, which can bounce your own unit back to your hand. Thankfully, Direwolf did listen and did nerf Insect Swarm, because at 2, even though it was only a 1/1, that was just completely oppressive, and format warping. So the fact that that's changed now to a 3-drop 1/2, I haven't really played with it too much now that it's changed like that, but yeah, there's mostly the bounce theme is kind of mostly, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of limited to would be time.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, you've got those two, but because the pieces are in common, and if the color is open, you're relatively likely to see multiple copies of each. So you can kind of, even without the like Kenya Graviturgis is not great, but you don't necessarily have to bounce on its own. Sorry, it's not great on its own as like a 4-drop 2/2 flyer. But if you bounce another unit that it doesn't have unleashed, it's kind of serviceable. And then when you start to get those combos going, it can be quite potent for sure. So yeah, it's one that I've played with quite a bit, and bouncing a Green Stitch Griffin, giving it +1/+1, and then making 2 3/3 flyers on 6, because you've got the Graviturgist that's already got flying. So hopefully that's stuck around for a few turns, and you can take advantage of that. It's quite nice.
Is there a critical mass of like bounce that you want? I mean, obviously with just one, it's fine because the Unleash cards are. I guess never mind. Because the Unleash cards are good by themselves, so you don't even need like, all right, I need to make sure I get this much bounce spells to be able to do it multiple times. Like, if you get it, great. If you don't, the card's still good. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I like to, because Lost in Thought is kind of quite nice anyway. I like having at least one of those effects, because it's got Inscribe as well, right? So Inscribe is just such a good mechanic that many of those cards as you can. But yeah, I'd probably say between 3 of those kind of effects. So 2 Graviturgist and 1 Lost in Thought is kind of nice if you've got like a couple of sort of 3, 4 Unleash units. So yeah, I don't think I'd play. I probably would play Teleport, which is just kind of Lost in Thought without Inscribe, but can do any unit. So that's not in the format, but if it was, I would probably play that if I had sort of 4, getting up to 4, 5, 6 kind of Unleash units. Although that is kind of pushing it a little bit. It could happen sometimes for sure.
Okay. And then, John, let's send over you for the recursion, which is more of obviously getting it out of your grave or your void and playing it there. Talk to us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I mean it's just you can still have some bounce effects in there, because I think you're usually still playing time, but this means you're playing Shadow alongside it, and then you're playing like Through the Unknowns, or like I've never been so happy playing an Inseparable like in the last format as I have in this format. That card's gone a little up for me, and then at the top end, you have, and this is a Xenon card, you have the Xenon Adept, which kind of does it all. It's like a threat on its own, pulls your favorite unit from the void, and buffs its stats. Um, so I think basically you're substituting the bounce effects mostly for cards like that. But if you're already playing time, like for Xenon Adept, I think you might have bounce effects and void recursion for like the Wombo combo, or just more ways to do the thing. But you can just play like Feln, for example, uh, and have maybe the option to do like the Carnivorous Terrors or the Griffins, or just in Feln, most of the better ones that you'll get that are unleashed are like rares and stuff, right? Like the Minotaurs and the Terrors. But man, if those colors are open, like you'll get them. It seems like, but a lot of times I end up, with the commons and uncommons, I'll be either kind of TJP and just be like the bounce unleash deck, or I'll be like maybe TJS or TPS and kind of do both, which I think like that's like I think it's a more reliable strategy when you kind of have both options. But I think both are fine just because of the power of unleash.
And I mean, well, plus two, like to just do the shadow version, like you really just need the one card. I keep wanting to call it Dark Return, but obviously it's not. And it's so easily slashable. So, I definitely don't think it's difficult to kind of come into something like that because the cards are so readily available, right?
Yes and no. Like Through the Unknown is the card. It's like I think it's not trivial to get that first copy, because now the Frenzy deck is fighting for it a little harder as well. Um, because it's
Uh,
like fast with the ping. So like yeah, like if I find in this format, like if I take like the rare and pack one pick one over that Through the Unknown, I may not see another one. Sometimes Shadow is like wide open and you do see them, but I think it's less common now than maybe it was before the changes.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, like you said, after the change, they definitely made it to where multiple decks won it, and that was good on them. That's exactly what they were trying to do, and mission accomplished, of course, because the devs know what they're doing. So, fair enough. All right, let's move on to a more known archetype, but still something that we need to talk about because it is possible in the format, much like one of the cards that we've already talked about as far as the Unleashed Flyers, but it's the Flyers deck. So, John, sending it back over to you. Talk to us a little bit about the Flyers archetype.
Sure, there's like two main cards that kind of buff your flyers, right? There's Majestic Skies, the Elysian relic, and then there's Windscreamer, which we already mentioned. So those like just kind of give +1/+1 to all your flyers, and just the nature of guys being a two faction card, I feel like if those colors are open, your chances of getting one at least a few picks into like your pack are pretty high. Like I think I think it's like usually a mistake to try and force, or pack one pick one your skies and then kind of force that archetype, right? Like it seems like that is a card that will come your way if that's open in my drafts, in my experience. So um essentially what that card does is just like make all your flyers, which are already good, just kind of that much better. It just means like you don't even need to worry so much about like killing their flyers to push yours through, because yours are just going to kind of stand out already. And then like that relic has that additional mode where later in the game you can pull out the exact flyer you want for the situation, whether that's like the Aegis 6-drop one that shoots a thing, and then just with the Skies buff that already deals 3 damage when it comes in instead of 2, which is nice. Or like maybe you're even later in the game already at 9 power, you grab your like copy of Swarm, suddenly have 3 flyers out or whatever at ambush, um, things like that. Windscreamer kind of does a similar thing, and it's a unit, which tends to be better. But then you're also going to want uh, ways to trigger the frenzy in your deck as well, which means like even more kind of synergy to keep in mind while drafting. Um, And I've been surprised anytime I get past one of those. I'm like, man, a few picks in, like I like that's the kind of card I'll always try and splash basically, just because I like it so much. But some people will definitely take other things over it, and you might end up getting one. And yeah, that's even though it's a 3-drop, that's a card I don't mind splashing, right? So, and it's honestly a card that if I have enough flyers, I don't even if I have 0 ways to trigger Frenzy, I'll still probably play it. Um, it kind of does a lot of work on a board when you're a Skies deck, and it's like a removal magnet too. So, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, essentially you're wanting to just kind of win via flying damage in a deck like this, and so you do want some ground units that can just completely jam up the ground, right? Like 2/5, 0/5 kind of wall type creatures, 1/4 scaly Gruons, even a Terry T, 6/5 for 5 can kind of fill this role, right? Like that's the kind of card where that can just be jammed up forever as far as trying to attack and deal damage, right? Like what if they just have a rock for it, right? You just get pumped by a 0/1 literally every turn. It doesn't have evasion, but it's really good on defense either way. Happy Harvester is another one that has really overperformed in this role. Like basically any X4 or X5, hopefully with some attack stats, is kind of what you want. So you like a deck like this, you want cards like that to jam up the ground, and then a lot of flyers, and then like some interaction, hopefully, in case they have like one extra large flyer, or maybe all of their flyers are like, you know, X4s or X3s for some reason, right? And you're like 2/2s and you don't have your stat buff. So some way to kind of push through in those situations is nice as well while you're like waiting for your skies or whatever.
Yeah, that's always the absolute worst when you when you're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna get in there with flyers, and the opponent throws down like a 1/4, and you're like, I don't know what to do about this.
Yeah, so these decks tend to be somewhere on the TPS, Time Primal Shadow uh, color scheme, right?
Hmm.
There's obviously a few good Justice flyers as well, but um, I don't know. You want to be like I think typically in the TPS area for a Skies deck, um, Elysian and Primal being the colors with the buffs, and then Shadow just has some nice flyers, right? Like the bats, or I think you can be Felm and just play Windscreamer and bats and stuff, and be more aggressive on the aggressive side. Like the the time primal decks tend to want to go later as opposed to being more aggressive.
And then, how do you feel? Do you feel like the 1/4s are good enough, or are you really looking for that 5 toughness to make sure they kind of survive?
On the ground,
Yeah.
um, no, I think the 1/4s can really hold the ground for quite some time. Like the only thing that can really punch through those is like if the opponents have their own Towering Terrazons, like as far as common and uncommon units, like obviously there's like once you get into rares, there can be other things that can kind of push through that. But yeah, like 3 attack is kind of the average for ground units in this format. So yeah, even just a stupid Scaly Gruon can really hold the ground for quite some time, like for free basically.
Gunnar, do you have anything to add about this deck? I mean, John he's taking a lesson from you and was pretty thorough in it, but
Definitely,
what?
definitely. No, no, this like John was saying, 1/4 toughness does seem to be the magic number, and that's why Groin has been so good for me. I think is because outside of 6/5 Terrazon, Cobbler is like a 4/3, but that's an uncommon in Primal. There's not too much else that's in the Unleash packs anyway that can get through. Um, like the 4/1 ambush, I guess, shadow unit, but that's more like a removal spell anyway, because as I found it, it's kind of like a situational caustic rain that can't block a flyer or can't kill a flyer. Sorry. So yeah, four toughness is definitely the magic number, and 5 is just even better if you can get it. Um, and yeah, like because you want to play flying units anyway. Flying units are great. So even if you don't draw your payoff, you don't draw your skies in a game, um, you don't draw your win screen. You know, hopefully you've set up your deck so that you're still able to kind of win out even without those kind of pump effects. And Ravenform as well has been very good, as I found it in Primal. Just being able to transform a sneaky, like a blocker at instant speed, or even someone attacking into you, like eating their creature after blocks is very nice.
Yeah, I think the instant speed of that card definitely. I was a little nervous about it just because making a flyer, a 1/1 flyer,
Yeah.
is significantly more powerful than just making a
Yes.
1/1. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
the fact that you could do it mid combat, like John had mentioned initially, you're just able to essentially, kill the creature that you're turning into a 1/1 that turn. So it makes it
Yeah.
significantly less of a cost or a threat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had exactly the same reservation as well at the beginning of the format, and then as I started playing with it, the instant speed definitely became more and more relevant.
All right, let's move on to the Relics Matters deck with essentially exactly that. Pretty straightforward. Want to draft some relics? Well, go ahead here. Go ahead. You can take this one.
Sure. So there is kind of it's unfortunate that Direwolf hasn't really been able to support this one too much outside of sort of uncommon payoffs and higher rarity. But there is definitely like a theme with relics. So you have before the nerf, double doors was definitely a relic that you were looking to take if you had some unleash units, because it was so powerful, especially with like insect swarm and stuff. Giving any units you draw +1/+1 was very nice. Now that swarm is not so good, it's not that great anymore. But it still has some uses. I would say niche circumstances. Namely, most of the time, if you have like a Tinker Unius, the Justice Uncommon for 2 that gets unleashed if you have a relic, that one can just be. And it also has Taunt and Warcry on a 2/2. So if you're playing sort of 3 of those, it's very hard for your opponent to win if you're able to do that. There are some other kind of. We mentioned the analysts. We've now pack one, pick one, and sort of some of the synergies with that. Whether it be the bow, Eldermark is not particularly playable, but if I have like multiple analysts, I would consider probably playing it. It gives you a scout for one time, and then if you play a 4 toughness or 4 health unit, it's you draw a card, so it kind of triggers the analyst straight away. If you're able to play it before you play the analyst, which is quite nice. Then you have some other kind of consuming greed, as we also had in our pack one pick one. I haven't been able to get that to pop off too much, unfortunately, because I haven't really built in that direction. But I've definitely seen people with with the hour cycle that there is. Each color has a relic on 2 that draws a power and also has an effect for 6. And so being able to sack one of those for a 6/4 on curve is quite nice. After you've also been able to get the power out of it as well, so you're actually up a card out of it, which is kind of, especially in this format, which is mostly tended on the kind of grindy control side, for me anyway, is always good, being able to get card advantage and stuff like that. So yeah, outside of those things, really, there's not really too much relic recursion. Just thinking about previous formats and stuff like that, there's not that kind of stuff going on, but there's just kind of a very minor relics matter theme, I think, running through.
Fair enough. So it's not really a deck that you're kind of in. It's just kind of a package you have within a deck.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So you might have, like I mentioned, kind of elder marks, which you wouldn't play unless. I mean, some people probably wouldn't play them anyway because it's not. Sometimes you could argue it's not really worth a card. But I think if you have enough, if you had a couple of greeds, unionists, and some analysts, one or two analysts, stuff like that, when you start looking in that direction, then they kind of become quite appealing. And so yeah, you can definitely have like a package of cards that you would add into a deck if you felt like it was something that would probably improve your chances of winning, and you're able to kind of during the drafting phase, you're able to pick up those. Maybe there's not much else going on in the pack, and so there's 2 or 3 cards left or what have you, and there's an Elder Mark there. You can kind of grab a few of those unwanted cards and then maybe fit them in when you come to deck building.
Okay. John, anything to add about the Relics Matters deck?
Not really. Like, yeah, it's like that one's like kind of Gunnar mentioned. The prioritization for a lot of these relics is kind of relatively low. You can kind of get those late. Most of them, like some of the hours, right? Like the time one in particular, maybe you pick that up regardless of any synergies because it's just kind of good usually. The shadow one can be as well. And yeah, like I mean, you mentioned like greed. I think like there's also kind of a Stone Scar sack deck, which kind of does sacking of units and relics, right? Like you can play like some nice aggressive 1 and 2 drops, and then kind of play like that uncommon fire one. I forget the name now, but it makes like a Sentinel 5/4.
Oh yeah, the Exhausted Experiment or whatever.
Yeah, the experimental chamber, right? So you can kind of go like 1 or 2 drop attack, sack it on 3, make a 5/4, and then on 4 you can sack that relic. Which I mean, you can scout with it, but that's like not something you want to be doing in an aggressive deck anyway. You have to exhaust a unit, so then you can like turn 4, play a greed, and sack the relic again, and your board is kind of like way ahead of schedule at that point. It's like if and like those are the kind of those are like mostly uncommon or commons, and then like chambers and uncommon, but that's one that a lot of people don't even like to play if they're in fire. So like that's one that you can kind of get a few copies of if fire's open anyway. So yeah, like that's like a high synergy, very aggressive kind of sack deck, which is kind of an interesting one that can come together if you want it to. And then like the 6/4 that greed makes is only a 2 drop as well, so you can also get a little cheeky with ways to recur that card from like for 3 power. You can just play it through the unknown and play your 2 drop, which is a 6/4 again. It pings them, and that's like also a card that works insanely well with an old favorite in Sweet Dreams, right? Like fast speed 6/6.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I mean, there's some fun stuff. Like I like a deck like this. It's just like, you don't want to force it, obviously, because I think the greeds tend to come around and show up, but sometimes they just won't, right? Like, so it's just like some of these payoff cards just may not show up. So it's not an easy deck to get into, but if you're finding yourself getting past a lot of these cards, maybe you can make it happen. It's definitely not a very reliable deck in the draft portion. Sometimes you can kind of fall into it.
Yeah, fair.
I would also
Okay.
just like to quickly touch on Striding Skyline as well, actually, which I kind of forgot about.
Oh yeah,
which is
that's
a
a
7
rare.
drop. Rare, yeah. But it's very powerful, to be fair, if you can pick one up early and yeah, throw in a couple of relics. I had a deck yesterday, actually. It was Praxis, and it had disciplinary studies, had the expedition gear, an hour, and that was it, I think. And I might have just been running super well, but I think an Arcanum Orb as well, which is like a 3 drop that gives you a maximum power. But on two of the games, I got to make 3 7/7s. Like I was sacking the expedition, I sacked the expedition gear twice as well, which kind of felt a bit wrong. But it turned out it was kind of the right play, and yeah, you can definitely pop off with this.
That's funny. Just casually making Oh man, that's the game. That's the game that I probably would let it ride out just because how often do you get to do it? But oh man, would that be rough?
I think you're happy. I mean, you're fine with one, but like anytime you can just make two of those on a turn, you're like feeling
Yeah.
pretty good about your chances right there.
Yeah, most definitely. Huh. All right, cool. Let's move on to the control list. John, talk to us about the control deck because I sure as heck cannot play Control Unlimited.
Well, I think there's no shortage of like interaction slash removal in this format, and like even when I'm not trying to in any way, a lot of my decks tend to just have a low unit count and a higher spell count anyway. So I think like if you're like a control oriented player, you can really kind of build a deck with that in mind. Um, we kind of mentioned a lot of this kind of goes with the Skies deck, right? You want some evasive units to close out the game eventually, and you want cards like Scaly Gruon to jam up the board, and then you just kind of like, you're planning on killing your opponent slowly. You want to have like a good amount of ways to kind of churn through your deck, like card draw, things like Boundless Knowledge. Even Sleight of Hand can be okay. You just like typically wouldn't want to even like even if it's in your opening hand, you probably sandbag it until you're already at like 6 power or something before you snap that off. Even passing one or more turns with 3 open power, you just don't want to like miss your power drops
Mm-hmm.
until a certain point in the game, and you're playing for the late game anyway. So, but eventually, like you have cards that are like more unconditional removal, lights out, bust out, things like that, um, to like get rid of their key threats that would kill you. But otherwise, you're just kind of stalling the game, getting your evasive units out, pecking away, and things like that. And you're just kind of controlling the board. Cards like Thunder Pop kill a lot of evasive threats that you want to kind of get rid of while scouting, which can be quite valuable with a strategy like this. Um, and yeah, so it's not like yeah, you might have some synergies in the deck, like some of those uh, skies or frenzy kind of synergies available, and maybe you'll do some of them during a game, but it's more of like a value oriented deck with a lot of removal.
Okay. Which I mean, I definitely, especially with the access to Unleash, right? The fact that there's some removal in Unleash with like Soulfire and the I forgot what it is now, but the 4 power one in Shadow, like that definitely kind of makes your removal go the distance, right?
Yeah, lights out. It's the card I just mentioned, as well as Dune Wave. Like those are all
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
unleash removal spells. And I guess I didn't mention this, but you want like some of your units are hopefully unleash cards, right? So it's like you're hopefully 2-for-1ing your opponent's units while 2-for-1ing yourself onto the board, right? Like you just want that value, as many plays as you can make throughout the game.
Yeah, true story. True story. Uh Gunnar, anything to add about the control deck? I mean, I know it's not like a specific archetype, much like John mentioned. It's really just a late game value engine, but
Right. Yeah, I've kind of there's pretty similar expectations and kind of play patterns where you're just trying to reach a point in the game where you have your powerful spells, aerial deployment, which is just a ridiculous card. Uh, Even if you're splashing it or what have you, or mostly any kind of unleash, you're able to leverage your higher power count and just bury your opponent in card advantage with your unleash cards is kind of where you want to be. So being able to build up to that point with removal, yeah, that's why I kind of like bust out now that that's been um, that was buffed down to 5 cost, and Nevermore, like we've touched on, the stuff that answers pretty much everything, catch-all kind of answers, void bound on bust out, stopping the shenanigans through the unknown is very nice as well. So and the fact that both of those are single pip as well, so you can splash those is all quite nice. The Soulfires and Lights Out are double, so yeah, I wouldn't recommend smashing those ones. But if you can if you can pick up sort of Flash Flood as well is another one that's really nice for 8 power. You can kill 2 units, or you can use it as like a pseudo crystallize, just like stun your opponent's board for 2 turns, and that should be kind of enough to win the game most times if you're set up that way. So yeah, it's mainly taking advantage of that really super strong third pack, whether it be with inscribes or powerful invoke stuff, and just marrying that up with the unleashed stuff from Unleash.
Okay. All right. Now we talked about the control side, which is the late game. Let's switch it up for another one that I'm not super powerful in, but the aggro deck. Gunner, do you have a preference on how you or what makes you go into the aggro deck in this format with so many value engines?
Yeah, so I've been able to get a couple of decent aggro decks online, and that's mainly where I've started in fire. I think fire is probably the second strongest color, second to primal, because it has very nice commons. Like the bow that we mentioned is very good. It's got a decent 2-drop 3/1, even though that kind of Gran blanks it a little bit. You can still give it frenzy, give it flying. Derringer now means you can definitely get some very fast starts, especially on like a rebel sharpshooter. Turn 3 sharpshooter, turn 4 Derringer, swing for 6, and it has just built-in quick draw with that. So you can definitely take advantage and punish people if they're stumbling on their power base. Or Grumbo's platoon is great, but it's not that great on turn 2, and I'm loath to play it on turn 2 or 3 most of the time, because I'm like, I'll just wait till turn 4, but sometimes that can be too slow. And being able to if your opponent doesn't have sort of early interaction or blockers, stuff like that, and you're on the play as well, you can definitely punish them quite rough. And then there's quite a lot of finishes in the set. I don't feel comfortable sort of being at 5 life in too much in this format. I don't know if I don't quite know what that's due to, but with like Party Crasher, especially being able to exhaust a blocker, taunt something else, is kind of like swinging. It's like a two blocker attack swing in one turn. At fast speed, sort of like because it's got charge. It's you can kind of definitely catch people off guard. So it's one definitely to look out for if you're against fire deck and and they're pressuring you. You definitely have to say, okay, am I dead to Party Crasher now? Or how do I not die to it? For sure. So yeah, I think the fact with that, you still got the 6-drop from Cold Hunt, the one that gives unblockable.
Embezzler?
Embezzler, yeah.
Yeah, I
that
don't.
can give you a lot of reach.
You said 5 health. Like, I don't feel comfortable being below like 7 or 8 because of like Party Crashers and Embezzlers and Soulfires. Like, sometimes you can just die.
Yeah, exactly. You can definitely get, or even it's sort of like the 4/1 ambush unit as well, or a couple of those collection rounds as the 3-drop shadow that makes 2 1/1s, and then suddenly make those at the end of your turn, and now you've got 2 1/1s that you have to basically chump block, but they're attacking you, so it means your opponent's bigger units can get through, for sure.
And one nice little combo with that is the the rounds, so the 2 1/1s, and then like on your turn you slap a ritual dagger on one of those guys. Like, you already got the fodder. I mean, maybe you've got something in play and you can have 2 taunt guys, but like that just makes that one taunt guy just huge, and basically at fast, not fast speed, but it's like it has charge basically.
Yeah, for sure. That's got me a couple of times, and I've definitely got some people with that. Yeah, because a 5/5 taunt on turn 3 is basically eat your 2 or 3 drop, and then taunt is, even though there's not a deck like around it, it is a it can snowball and take over the game, because unless you're basically at that point you're saying you have a removal spell, dead the unit, or you're dead type thing, because you can't just play one unit at a time and ignore it for a few turns to try and double block it. It's basically just going to chew down and destroy a unit every turn.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a bit feel bad, but very strong.
Yeah, taunt goes great with aggro strategies.
Yeah, I've definitely been caught on the receiving end of them paying like a 2-drop and then giving it like a buff, or a taunt 2-drop and then giving it a buff, and like everything what I play for the next 3 turns is just gonna get wrecked. It's like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you have that sinking feeling of hopelessness because it is literally hopeless.
Yeah. So yeah, outside the aggro decks that I've had I've been mainly base fire, then fire, Ricano or Skycrag or Stone Scarf mainly for me. Yeah.
All right.
I like the
John,
Skycrag a lot because that one, if you don't get the perfect aggro deck going, like Skycrag has a lot of kind of mid-range potential as well. It's just a lot of good cards, like you mentioned, kind of Fire and Primal are some of the better colors by themselves right now.
what anything different about the Skycrag versus the Stone Scar?
I think just the general unit quality, and then I think you have it seems like you have more early interaction, whereas like with Shadow, it's like Bust Out and Lights Out or much later game kind of interactive cards. Like in Skycrag, you get Thunder Pop and Nevermore, which come down a little earlier than those typically. And then you get like the nice Primal Flyers, so you get like not just ground smashing, you get the evasive threats going earlier as well.
Fair enough. So Alex unfortunately isn't here to talk to us about the 4 and 5 color goodness. So John, do you want to lead us off on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I still try and draft funky 4 and 5 faction decks in this format, even though it's tends to be a little more difficult. As opposed to the last format where I was only relying on inscribes and dual faction powers, it's like now 2 or 3 seek powers plus like maybe 1 to 3 dual powers, and then hopefully some inscribes. Like, coming out of the only Cold Hunt pack with 3 plus inscribes is where I would want to be there. And then like there's a couple inscribes in the new packs as well. So sometimes like a deck like this, I'll start out with actually 1 or more inscribed cards from packs 1 and 2, and it's just like you just kind of are staying open in pack 1, and you're just drafting powerful cards anyway because signals are weird most of the time in pack 1 and sometimes don't even matter. And then it's like sometimes in pack 2 you're getting past powerful cards as well, and it's like kind of muddled signals. And it's like, well, I've got these powerful cards, I've got some fixing, now I'm gonna definitely prioritize more fixing if I can. Maybe prioritize inscribes over some powerful cards in the Cold Hunt packs, where the inscribes are way more plentiful. And then during the games, mulligan well and cross my fingers. And then sometimes it just works out, and all your cards are quite powerful, and you get to style on opponents.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you. Every time I try to do even when I push 3 colors, I end up just bad decisions, mistakes were made. Gunner, have you been gutsy enough to do the 4 and 5 color good stuff in this format?
Yeah, a couple of times I've managed to get it to work out. Mostly because the power level of the commons is quite low. In Unleash, Seek Power is usually, if I see it quite early on, it's probably what I'm going to take most of the time, unless it's like a really nice rare or uncommon. It's just leaves you kind of open to splashing yeah, sort of those powerful effects that I'm talking about. The flash floods, the aerial deployments, the menageries, any of the invoke cards from Cold Hunt. And so if I can pick up sort of one or two of those quite early on, and then not really have too much of a direction, I just, as you say, taking the most powerful cards in a vacuum, ideally single faction ones, you can then sculpt a little bit, sort of your picks. So, okay, what am I kind of missing at this point? What do I need now going into Cold Hunt, where yeah, you're hoping a little bit there with regards to what you see, but even if you don't see the invoke cards, you can still usually grab some quite nice inscribes that are just good to splash, but also enable the splash, like the eavesdrops, the wings, Starkest Wings, the Carnosaur, the Spellhammer, the Eagle, all of those common inscribed cards. They're just nice to have because they do have inscribe on, but also you can play a 5/5 revenge later in the game if you have the power as well. So if you build your deck that way, yeah, you can definitely take advantage of that stuff, coupled with the, as we've discussed, the card advantage from the Unleashed mechanic itself.
Yeah, Inscribe definitely gives you a little bit of leeway, right? Where you're not, it's kind of like you're working on fixing as well as still developing your deck, which is really nice. But yeah, no, I still, I still think it would just not work out very well for me, and so. But
you got to believe. But that's the first step, is believing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you can go ahead and just stop it right there. I'll believe I'll get mana screwed, that's for sure. All right, fair enough. So I think that's what we'll call it here. Do you guys have any closing statements as far as the archetypes go for Unleashed before we throw a bow on it?
Better?
No. I would just say, outside of probably Frenzy, there's not really sort of too many like strict decks. You've kind of just got the color pairs and you break it down like that, or 3-color, 4-color, stuff like that. So yeah, we've done a very nice breakdown, but yeah, kind of Frenzy being the key word is kind of the one that Direwolf, I think, have chosen to push this time. But maybe with some changes, if there are any changes before the format for like the Open comes, do keep an eye out, because some cards that are not ones you're looking to pick up right now, with a few sort of key additions in the is that a thing anymore, or am I talking like old format? They're not going to change up the actual cards that are in the reprints.
No, I don't think they can or are planning on it. Honestly,
Right.
I think all they can really
Fine.
do is change the pack order, or like the number of which sets of packs, and
Okay.
do actual card changes, buffs and nerfs.
Yeah, because this will be the first Open, I guess, with the new setup
Mm-hmm.
of, for draft, I guess. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. So yeah, if the pack order changes, which I don't think they're definitely not gonna change the order, right? Because they've said it will be 2 of the new set, 1 of the older set, and then 1 of the newer set, I think, is what I want to say.
I wouldn't say they definitely won't. I think it feels like this is probably going to be the format with maybe a couple more draft oriented buffs and nerfs.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't put anything. It's like I'm not gonna put my guarantee stamp on it. Like, I think there's a slight chance they do something wild still.
Sure. Okay then. Yeah. In that case, yeah, probably if this is kind of where we're set, then yeah, that advice is outdated. So I will I will just say good luck in the Open if I don't see you before.
Yeah, I think now's a good time to get in between now and then, plenty of practice. Like, learn the fast cards, learn the ambush units, get a feel for the set and the strategies. I think just playing games will be some good preparation. I also kind of don't think they're going to really change much, if anything, before the Open. Like, the format feels pretty good to me right now. All colors are at least viable. It's like we mentioned so many archetypes and strategies. It's like, your average draft format tends to be a lot of mid-range decks, maybe leaning one way or another. But this one, it feels like you can literally do aggro, mid-range control, as well as like synergy in this direction, synergy in that direction, good stuff decks. It's like you can kind of, you might be able to draft towards those preferences, but obviously it still kind of matters what cards in the packs are coming your way. But I don't know. I think if you have a strong play preference one way or another, you might be able to even kind of force your way into a deck that you feel extra comfortable with.
Yeah, especially since like it's so independent, right? Since there's no pot or anything, you really want to try to capitalize on what's getting fed to you so you can have the highest quality of deck. It's not one of those things where they're self-correcting, where if your deck is medium, hopefully everyone else is in the pod's medium. So,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's a very good call as well with the fast spells. That's really the trick that you want to learn for sure. Because being able to know what your opponent could be leaving up can definitely save you, potential 2-for-1 accidents and whatnot. So,
Yeah, and then of course once you make it to day 2 and the draft open, that kind of goes out the window a little bit because you have open deck lists.
yeah, exactly. Which,
And I'm assuming it'll be like the last one where they're like, oops, you weren't supposed to be able to edit your decks, even though we've done it for the last few opens. It's like halfway through the last draft open, they like turned that off, which totally messed up myself. I think Gunnar as well.
Yeah, it messed me up as well. But yeah. I was
But
playing Shafka's. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely gonna have that, in mind this time with like probably not gonna be able to edit your deck once you start playing. I feel like that's kind of what they are going for. I haven't seen a specific announcement one way or another since the last draft open with that, but they literally sent us an email during that last event. And they were like, "Oh, and by the way, we turned off your ability to edit your deck. Oops."
Yeah, and that was.
Godspeed.
I've played so many of these events, and this is the first time where I was actually okay. I'm going to adjust my deck in between rounds.
Yeah, I was
and
right
then,
there with you on that. Every other time I just played what I had. It was like I
yeah,
didn't really have any swaps. This one I like had some
yeah,
definite swaps in mind. There was edicts in the format,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Edicts.
right?
Yeah, that's right. Edicts with Shavka is the one that I played. Yeah, turned out it did quite well because it managed to snag a Hojan. Like in the game I brought it in for and stuff, and was actually quite useful. But yeah, it wasn't great to find it out just
Yeah.
as you have submitted your decks.
Yeah, I know. I went into like one of my games without actually knowing my deck list because they turned it off like while I was on my deck building screen at one point. So I don't even know what deck I had locked in, and they never sent us like deck lists. They sent us pools way before that only. So like I'm in my first couple games and I don't actually know what my deck list is. It was really kind of annoying. But hopefully they don't do anything like that again.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that sounds so bad.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know what I can draw.
I'll roll with the punches. I'm that kind of guy or whatever. But it was a little annoying.
Fair. Alrighty.
So, yeah. I think we'll definitely try and get in another show before the open.
Yeah, most definitely we can. The most advice we can give our listeners, why not, right?
Yep.
Help you, help yourself. All right, Gunnar, thank you so much, my friend, for taking the time out of your busy rocking the Draft League's #1 Eternal Champion day and time. We really appreciate you.
No, all good. Thank you very much for having me.
John, thanks for coming on the show, man. Always a pleasure.
Always
realizing
a good time.
how horrible I am at this game.
Help
right,
me
guys,
help you.
That will do it. So thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, as always, happy gaming.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good luck in your draft queues.
Everyone.